Okay, so this is going to be a different kind of instructional video. This one is for the uninitiated guitar player, even uninitiated with music theory. Um, I'll give you an example of the practical need for this. Maybe you're a pastor or a church leader, and you're suddenly needing to begin leading worship. You need to play a song. You need an instrument. You need accompaniment, and you start with nothing, right? You might have a guitar, and so let's assume you have a guitar, but you don't know anything about it. And so what this instructional video is to help you learn to play one song with literally no knowledge of a guitar. Okay, so I'm playing my guitar right now, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to play a song using just the chords that are in the song. If you don't even know what a chord is, I'll explain what that is later. I don't want to assume anything. But I'm going to teach you to play a song, and I'm going to show you all the chords that are needed to play it. I'm going to talk about the pattern that you would strum the strings, different tools you would use, and try to go from there and keep this super simple. Okay? I'm going to give you a very simple way to do this. There are always more than one way to do these things. And so the way I'm going to give you would be the way that I would teach my 9-year-old to do it right now. With the limited capacity they have in their fingers and in their knowledge of music. So that's what we'll do. Okay. Now, the song we're going to go with is a song called "How Great Is Our God." Why? Everybody knows it. You can play it in the key of G. You'll understand what that means later, but the key of G is a very easy key to play. The chords in it are very standard. There's only 3 chords. There's a G, a C, a D, and an E minor. Those chords are just the different notes turned into chords that you need to actually be able to play the song. They're all easy to use in first position. There's no complicated bar chord that you have to play, which is really hard to kind of work within your fingers. It's very basic, and there's also room to grow. So you can learn to play it in a very basic way, but you can change the way you play it in that very same key and make it more intricate as you grow and get more confidence. So everybody knows it. It's an easy one. It fits my philosophy of picking out songs, which is it needs to be singable, it needs to be clear, and it needs to have a message that's true. And so all of these things make this a good song to work on. Basic instructions. So a couple things to think about terminology. Okay, you're looking at a guitar right now. When you look at a guitar, I'll take this off so that you can see it. You'll notice a few things about it, right? You've got your guitar body, and you've got your neck, and you've got your headstock. Okay, you don't really need to know all those things, but those are the basic parts of the body: the body, the neck, and the headstock. All right. Now, when you play, you might be thinking about playing by strumming, and you'll do that with a pick, or you can do that with your fingers if you want to do that as well. So you can just kind of put your thumb and finger together and pick this way as well. It's not as nice as using a pick, right? So you use a pick, you get a nice even sound through all the strings. And then from there, you have a couple of other things that you would deal with in the guitar. No, first of all, when you strum with a pick, you're usually doing it somewhere near over top of the sound hole. I tend to personally end up being a little in front of it. It matters a little bit, so play with that to get a feel for what you think is going to sound best for you. But that's what this is, the sound hole. You're going to be pressing the strings on what we call the fretboard. So the fretboard is this black lined board on the guitar, and these lines are steel, what we call frets, and the frets basically are your cheat sheet. It helps you know where one note becomes another note right at that fret. All right, so it's just a way for you to kind of navigate the fretboard on the frets. So it's called the fretboard. These are the frets, and this is where you make the music. This is where you actually change the sound. I can strum the same 6 strings, and I can get different sounds. Okay? All right, and so you play on the fretboard. That being said, when I say put your finger on a given fret, then you'll know what I mean, right? The frets. When I say on the fret, I don't mean literally on it. I mean like maybe just right behind it where you can barely see. Because sometimes when you play it on it, you get kind of a muted sound. You want it to ring clearly, so you go right behind it. You don't want to be too far behind it because that can slightly change the pitch and make it sound weird. So right there on the second half of that fret right there, is where you would play if I were to say the 3rd fret. All right. Obviously, we've got our strings, we've got our headstock, and we've been talking about the headstock. Your strings come here, and then they are tuned with the tuners. Okay, and so sometimes they're called tuning pegs. In this case, just tuners. No big deal. And then you'll see dots on the fretboard. Don't even worry about those right now, but that's something that you'll learn to understand what they mean. You've got your sound hole. You have this thing here that your strings rest on up here. It's called a nut. And this is essentially your 0 fret, right? You got your 1st fret. This is like fret 0, but it's the nut specifically because it has little notches that accept the strings and hold them in place at the appropriate height above the fretboard. On the other end of your guitar, as you can see here on mine, you have what's called the bridge. It's this big decorative wooden thing here. It's usually made of wood, and you'll see it has the bridge, the real functional part of it is this white piece. So it's similar to the nut on the other end in that it accepts and holds the strings in place. And these bridge pins are what basically tighten the strings and keep them from falling out. The tension is pretty high, so I've had situations in the past where I've been playing with an old set of strings and I played and one of them broke, really slashed my hand real good. So you have to be careful when you're changing strings or doing anything to understand the tension and ease it off before you start messing around with strings. And do change your strings a lot, when you can. Something you'll learn later. But there's a tour of the fretboard. All right, if you're overwhelmed, just erase everything you just learned. None of it matters at this point, but I wanted to give you a tour in case you thought it was interesting. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the song itself, all right? But before we do that, I wanted to give you 3 things that you're going to need to just work on. Know this before you start trying to do everything you see me doing, because you'll get frustrated. It's not something you can just do rolling out of bed. So there's a couple things that you'll need to work on. And so I don't want you to get discouraged. I want you to just know it will take work and invest the time. First thing is the pressing of the strings on the frets. I am holding down this string with very minimal pressure. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. If you press too hard, you see how it changes the pitch. When you play, you're going to have the opposite problem. You're going to have a hard time getting a nice clear sound out of pressing the strings. So you got to work on that. Work on finding that right spot right behind that fret to get it there. And know that when you're trying to do it on 2 different strings with 2 different fingers, there's some dexterity, not ambidexterity, but some dexterity that you'll have to build in your fingers. Practice is it. Now, the way you practice it is by playing chords. And so that's the second thing that there's really no shortcuts around, is when you're learning a song has more than one chord. A chord, as far as you're concerned at this point, is a shape that you play on the guitar. So in this case, I'm playing what we'll call a G chord. That's the note on the scale that it occupies. And the G chord is played by just holding down your 3rd fret up here on this string at the top, and the same fret, 3rd fret down here on the bottom string. When you hold it down, your finger will mute this string so you don't hear it, and then the rest of these notes open, all fit into the chord. All right, so it's a simple chord. You only hold down 2 places. That's what we call our shape. And when you play the chord, you get this sound. All right, so you learn how to hold the fretboard right by playing actual chords, and then when you hear good sounds, you know that you've kind of happened upon a good place to touch it. But you'll note that there's more than one chord in a song. So when you're playing a song and you need to switch chord, it's not going to work that way the first time. No problem. It's something you have to learn. So that's why learning over a song that you're familiar with, you've got an ear that knows where you're headed, so that you can, because you've heard the song before, so you can work toward that, but don't be frustrated that the journey will be long and will take some practice. Another thing that will happen if you practice a lot is, if you've never done any really intense work with the tips of your fingers, and most people don't, you're going to feel a little soreness the first day, maybe the first week. And if you play a lot, eventually you're going to build calluses on those fingers, and those calluses actually help you play better. And you might have some slight bleeding of the fingers in between. If you do, just take a day, put a little Neosporin and a Band-Aid over it. Once it clears up, you're good to go. Honestly, it's a badge of honor to have blood on your guitar strings because that means you're learning and you're working hard at it. But let your tolerance for pain dictate how that goes. But practicing a little bit every day will allow you to build those calluses over time without going through that painful part of it. So 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day, practice, and you'll build those calluses over time without the stress of that. So these are the types of things there are no shortcuts for. Getting the right feel for how you press the strings, switching between chords. There's a smoothness there that you just have to learn. And then singing over your own playing is another one. When we play songs, right, I'm playing, I've got a strum pattern in my right hand, I've got a chord shape that I'm playing in my left hand. That's a lot of my brain bandwidth that's being used just to make my hands do what they're supposed to do. Now I got to sing. That is something that takes time. It's taken me 25 years of playing guitar to even get to a point where I don't feel embarrassed to sing over my playing in front of the church. I still think I have a lot of room to grow. So don't worry about that. If you're going to play for the first time, maybe have a companion with you to sing. And of course, if you're going to do that, you need to practice with them. That way you can just focus on the playing and they can do the singing. All right, that being said, so let's learn this song. We're going to, basically learn how great is our God, and we're going to learn it in a standard, simple tune in what we call the key of G. All right, so the key of G gives us 4 basic chords to work through. We've got the actual G chord, so there's a key and there's a chord. The key just tells us the overall atmosphere for at what level, what pitch the song will be played at, right? So I could play it like this. The splendor of the King, and you can hear my voice at a certain pitch. If I were to play it a step up in the key of A, the splendor of the King. So you see how my voice went up? I'm changed keys, all right? So that's what we mean by key, is the standard pitch level that the whole song is sung at. Within each key, there are multiple chords that help you play a song, right? So in this one, for example, your G chord is the first chord in the key of G. Makes sense. It's the first chord in the key by the same name. So you have a G chord, right? And the G chord again, and I'm playing it by using my second finger and my third finger to hold those on the strings. That just gives us a key of G. You might find it when you start switching chords to use your ring finger and your pinky finger to hold those. It's good exercise to do that because your pinky finger often needs the most work on the dexterity. So either way, play it however you can. You'll probably find this the most comfortable. Middle finger, ring finger, 3rd fret on both the top and bottom strings. And that gives us the chord of G. Now, you have the chord of G, which is great. In this song, if we were going to follow the verse progression, your next chord is what we call an E minor. E minor is it occupies the 6th position in the key of G. All right, so when you play the E minor, what you're doing is you're going to work with the 5th string here, and we count from the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This 5th string, and you're going to work with the 4th string. Okay, and you're going to go on the 2nd fret for each of those. So again, I'm using those same 2 middle fingers. All right, and sometimes they got to be, not necessarily both of them as close to the fret as one another, so don't stress that. Just kind of put them both over the frets like this. Your ring finger on the 4th string, your middle finger on that 5th string, and then you play all 6. All right, so if we were thinking, the splendor of the King, robed in majesty. All right, so you have the first few bars right there. And then let all the earth rejoice gets us into our next chord. All right, this is a C. Now, this is the first one where we're using 3 fingers, right? So we got the same 2 we've been using and our 1st finger. And what we're going to do is we're going to work with the 5th string right here on the 3rd fret. All right, so you can see where we're at. You're going to take your middle finger on the 4th string and the 2nd fret. Okay, so far this pinky's not touching anything, so don't let it fool you. All right, so you've got your 5th finger, 3rd fret, 4th finger, 2nd fret, and then your 1st finger is going to skip a string down to the 2nd string. All right, so that will be this one here, 2nd string on the 1st fret. And then what you can do this a couple different ways. I like to just play only the bottom 5 strings. If you're learning to use a pick, you're not going to be able to reliably you know, do that without accidentally hitting the bottom string, but note how it kind of fits anyway. So it's not a big deal, but it's best if you can do that. Sometimes you might want to just hover your pinky over and mute. If you don't press it down all the way, it mutes it. So it's one way to do it. It really doesn't matter, but the chord is those three, right? 5th string, 3rd fret, 4th string, 2nd fret, and then 2nd string, 1st fret. And when you play all 5 of those, you get to C. The other chord in this song is one that doesn't come up very often, but it is important to know, and it's the chord of D. So it's the D chord. So use those same 3 fingers, and you're going to well, there's a couple ways to do it. You might find this easier to use one finger to bar all 3 of the top strings, all right? And then either that finger or that finger to go into that 5th string here and move it to the 3rd fret. That's one way to do it. Way I learned it was take your 2 fingers here and go to the 3rd string and hold on the 2nd fret, and the 1st string and hold that on the 1st fret or the 2nd fret, so that the 5th string in between them gets on the 3rd fret. So you build this kind of a little triangle pattern here, and then you play the bottom 4. All right, so that's kind of the 4 chords. So you've got your G, which you play this way. You've got your E minor, you've got your C, and you've got your D. Now, if you know all those chords, you're going to be able to play this song. Now, I'm going to walk you through the progression, because when you play a song, oftentimes you repeat patterns over and over again. So the pattern of the verse is simply the G chord, the splendor of the King, and then the E minor, robed in majesty, and then the C, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. And then guess what you do for the rest of the verse? You repeat exactly what you just did. So if you can get to that point, you have learned the whole verse. You just do it twice. So he wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice. All right, and guess what? Verse 2, same. Verse 3, same. If there are more verses, they're all the same. Okay, so you've learned the verse. If you can play G, then you can go to E minor, then you can go to C, and hold that C for two bars, okay? We'll talk about that more in a minute as well. So G, E minor, C. Then you have the chorus, okay? So it's a very similar shape, right? You notice that we went from G to E minor to C. Well, guess what the chorus does? How great is our God. That's the G. Sing with me, how great is our God. That's the E minor, so far same as the verses. And all will sing how great, oh, there it is. There's is our God. So one little difference. You just, instead of playing that C for 2 bars, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. You're going, how great is our God. All right, so that is the whole song, because guess what? There's a bridge. Name above all names. It uses the same chord progression as the chorus. So you're learning 2 chord progressions which are very similar to one another. A G, an E minor chord, which is 5th and 4th string on the 2nd fret. Then your C chord, which is 5th, 4th, 2nd string, 3rd, 2nd, 1st fret. And then you play them all. And your D chord, which shows up just one time, right? So your verse again, G. Splendor of the King, clothed in majesty. E minor. Let all the earth rejoice. C. Let all the earth rejoice. Repeat it. He wraps himself in light. That's your G. Now go to E minor. And darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice. C. And trembles at his voice. Now the chorus. How great, G, is our God. E minor. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great. How great, D, is our God. All right, and you can then play the rest of the song that way. So you got those two little chord progressions. You put them together in a certain order, and you get How Great Is Our God. You've learned 4 chords: G, E minor, C, and D. You've learned 2 chord progressions. The verse is G, E minor, C, C, and the chorus is G, E minor, C, D. All right? Now, here's what you're not going to be able to do. You're not going to be able to play that even as slow as I just played it. You're going to be able to play it a lot slower. So what you're going to do is you're going to work on the chord. You're going to work on switching chords, which is a talent you'll need for any song, but you're going to use How Great Is Our God. And you're going to sing it really slow. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice. Let all the earth rejoice. All right? You're going to go that slow all the way through. Now, I'm singing and playing. You might not do that, right? You might just have it right in front of you. You'll also note that I'm changing the chords at a certain spot, right? So, the splendor of the King, and then right on the word clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice. And then right after that, let all the earth rejoice. There are certain places that you play chords. Now, when you first play this for a group, if it's the right setting, you could do it exactly like I just did, where on your right hand, which we haven't talked much about, you're just ringing the chord out nice and slow. What that allows you to do is it gives you time to switch before you need to play your next chord. So that's a cool way to play it for a group the first time, even though it's not going to have a whole lot of sound and ambience. It's going to be very basic, and that sometimes is okay. So in the right situation, just ringing those chords nice and slow, and then moving over, that'll be good. So learn that, practice the chords, getting those fingers on the notes solidly. Take your first full day and just work on getting each of those chords individually without worrying about switching to sound solid. Let that be your entire first day of practice. Your second day, then I want you to start working through each of those chords in that order: G, E minor, C, C, and then G, E minor, C, D. Work through those chord progressions on your second day and begin to start to understand and get the feel for switching your fingers. It's a choreography. Your fingers have to learn it. You're going to think, I must not be capable of doing this, and you will be wrong. You are capable. It takes time. It takes practice. So your whole second day, set your goal very modestly. I just want to be able to move through these chords by ringing them out clearly individually and going to the next one, even super slowly. All right? And if you can do that, you'll be able to. Speed comes later. Don't worry about speed. Third day is when you begin to start thinking about, okay, maybe I can try playing it for someone who might sing. And then you have your strum pattern, which is your right hand. So regardless of what you're doing, you can practice your strum pattern. It's often good to have chords that you can play it over, right? And so, as I mentioned, I've already kind of given you one example of a strum pattern you could use. You could just ring out the chords really slowly. Pick them one at a time. Clothed in majesty. Sometimes ring it out twice in there. Rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. All right, so you have that way of going about it. Totally up to you. All right. On your right hand, what I like to do is think about the timing of the song. So if you were to try to count through this song, it uses a 4 count. That's what I'll say at this point. There's a whole time signature thing we could talk about, but when you play this song, it feels most natural to count to 4 and then restart your count at 1 after 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the count. So we call that a time signature. There's a lot more to it than what I just gave you, but all you need to know is this song is in 4. It's a 4 count song. So what that means is that those 4 counts are what you're distributing your strum pattern over top of. Okay, so if they were a net, there'd be 4 little holes in the net, and whatever you're spreading out over that net is your strum pattern. So you have 4 counts to put your strum pattern over, and you're just repeating that pattern every 4 counts, right? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Clothed in majesty, 1, 2. Let all the earth rejoice, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Is that all right? So that's one way to do it. It's just simple 1, 2, 3, 4. Our God, 1, 2, sing with me, how great is our God, and all will be how great, how great. 3 is our God, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Name above all names. You are worthy of all praise. We're using the chorus progression in case you're wondering. My heart will sing, how great is our God. All right, so that's your basic chord progression. That's what you're doing. That's how things are working. All right. There's a lot for you to do there without me going any further. I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about where to go next. All right, so there are plenty of other things that you could learn more about. One thing you can learn more about is timing in music. All right, I just told you this song is in 4. There's more to it than that. That might be something to do a little Google search on, do a little bit of research, find a good YouTube video explaining what we call time signatures. So if you're looking for a keyword, time signatures for dummies, right? Find that and look it up. Another thing is scales, all right? As you move your fingers around playing chords, what you're doing is you're playing a chord is more than one note that sounds good together. Okay, that's all a chord is. More than one note that sounds good together. Now, you can play songs that way, but you know sometimes you hear lead guitar players playing, some sort of lead line through a song. Where do you get that? Where do you understand that? You learn what we call scales. There are different types of scales. There are what are called pentatonic scales. Those are good to learn. They help you understand the full fretboard and learn the notes that are there and get familiar with it so you know what sounds go good one after another. And that could give you the ability to fill in some of your chords. So that's something you could think about. Is scales. But you start with the scales. You don't start with the fiddling. You start with the scales. You learn the fretboard, and then you fiddle. Then you improv, I should say. Then there's keys. We talked about this is in the key of G. All right? The key of G is just a G scale turned into an entire song framework. And what that means is that I'm going to use only chords and notes that fit into that key. So I told you about the 4 chords we're using. G is the first note. E minor is the 6th note. C is the G, A, B, C. So G is the 4th, and D is the 5th. All right, and then E minor is the 6th. Right. So when you play a song, you don't use every chord in the key all the time. But we're going to use the 1st, the 6th, the 4th, and the 5th. All right. And so those are typically what you use in any key. So if you were to change the key to a completely different key, you're probably still going to use those same chords to play this song in a different key. So if I wanted to play an A, I'd still use the first note of the A chord, of the A key, and play from there. You're probably saying, Alan, none of that makes sense to me now. The point is that's something you can go to next and learn more about. You also need to learn more about playing guitar. I've given you a chord progression for this one song that can be used to play a number of songs. There are other chord progressions in the open, where you're not trying to bar or use a capo, that you can learn the open position, and you can learn those keys. One good one is the key of A, right? All right, you can learn that. That's a good one to learn. Another one is the key of D. Now you may notice there's some repeat chords. The key of D has the D chord, which you've already learned, and the G chord in it. And the A, so I mean, some of these are going to overlap a little bit. So as you learn those, they're all good to learn. The beautiful thing about that is that if you have a capo, which is another thing, this is your friend. The capo is a way to basically bring this nut wherever you want it. So this nut determines where the string vibration comes from. You can change that by putting the capo right about where you'd put your finger behind a fret, just behind the fret. I want you to see that. So you can still see daylight, you can see the fret, and try to keep it parallel. No worries. But what I've done is I've moved the tuning of my guitar up 2 steps. Why is that? Well, maybe the song I just learned to play in the key of G, the splendor of the King, maybe the word "the" there's too low for me. Maybe I want to try to move it up a little bit. I'll go up a couple steps, and I'll use the same chords. Now this is my nut. Here's my 3rd fret, right? And I can do the same thing. The splendor of the King, robed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice. Right? So you've got those chords you learned down here. You can now use them up here in a completely different key. As far as your fingers are concerned, it's the same. The capo is your friend. So those are some things you can learn. You need to learn more about the guitar itself. You've got to learn to tune your guitar. There's great apps. Fender makes a really easy app to tune your guitar with. I can do more talk about that in the future. But you need to know about the anatomy. You need to understand what the body and the sound hole and the neck and the nut and the bridge, what do they all have to do with one another? How does this thing work? And you want to learn a little bit about the anatomy of your guitar. So those are things that are important. You do want to learn what these dots are about. There's different things you can do with the dots. For example, the fancy ones up here, sometimes if it's just a basic guitar, it won't have these fancy inlays, but it'll just be little simple dots, and you'll learn a couple things about them. I don't want to teach about it now, but that's something that'll be useful for you to know and understand what those dots are for. But it's not essential. So those are some things to think about. You also want to go to certain places to find other music. Great. Maybe you master How Great Is Our God. Where do you want to go from here? Well, the first place is to find a set of chords. With this video, you should see the chords I used for How Great Is Our God written over the words, so you know where to change chords in terms of the song. You can find similar, what we call chord sheets, on websites like worshiptogether.com. You can purchase chord sheets for anything you want at praisecharts.com, and those are generally more detailed and have a legend at the bottom that show you how to shape each of the chords they give you. Really cool stuff. There's plenty that you can find all over the internet, but I found worshiptogether.com to be really predictable at giving me the same stuff every time, and then you can use their chords. They're just formatted a little bit more nicely on Praise Charts, but you have to purchase those. So you have different places. You can also reach out to me and say, hey, Alan, do you have some chords for XYZ? And if I've got them, I can get them for you. Since I'm not putting this on YouTube, I'm just giving this to my friends. I figure that's a safe thing for me to say, because there are copyright issues we want to be careful about. For songs with chords to learn, yep, exactly, worshiptogether.com. You can basically look up any worship song you know about, and they should have chords for it. You can change the key, so you can find a chord, a key that you already know the chords for, so maybe you're still learning A or D and you're more confident in G. You can pretty much transpose any song to that key, and then you can play it right there in your browser and learn that song. Once you've got your chord progression figured out and someone else can sing with you, I want to encourage you to learn to sing over your playing. It's hard and it won't come natural first, but it really does make leading worship a lot easier. So let this song kind of be your schoolmaster. Let it teach you, get confidence from it, and then apply what you've learned with other songs using those different places. And of course, if you have any questions, if I've left anything out, something doesn't make sense, you know where I'm at.